What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Tuesday, May 21st, 2019. Getting into the week here. A lot of stuff to talk about. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Sam is in our control room, ready to answer the phone, put you on the air with your comments, questions, and opinions. So all you professional kookafiers out there, wake up. It's time to earn your shekels. And let's get right on into it here. Okay, let's start off with Iran, because I'm starting to get a sense that U.S. policy towards Iran is becoming schizophrenic, because over on one side you've got Donald Trump and quite a few people at the Pentagon saying, we really don't want to do this. And on the other side, you've got John Bolton and Mike Pompeo and Benjamin Netanyahu saying, yes, do it, do it, do it, do it. Lindsey Graham is out there screaming that an overwhelming military response is needed. And he's basically talking about responding to this Houthi drone attack out of Yemen, which targeted an Aramco pumping station and pipeline. And Saudi Arabia is claiming that Iran was behind this. Oh, it's those Iranians. Gosh darn those Iranians. And so Lindsey Graham is trying to ramp things up again. So all I can say, Lindsey, is here's your rifle. Here's your parachute. Have fun. Now, Mitt Romney has a different point of view. He was on CNN's State of the Union and said that he doesn't believe President Trump or his hawkish National Security Advisor John Bolton want a war with Tehran. Agree on the first, disagree on the second. John Bolton never met a war he didn't like. So Mitt Romney was out there saying that war with Iran is not going to happen, and I certainly hope that he is correct. And again, it could just be a bluff. Send all the ships over there, rattle the sabers, and then scare Iran into renegotiating the nuclear deal to include the long-range missiles. But Iran right now is not backing down. In fact, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani said that all officials of Iran have reached a consensus to withstand the U.S. and its policy of sanctions, and saying that the situation is no longer suitable for talks with the U.S. And they make that reference about how the U.S. walked away from the JCPOA. That was talks with the U.S., and the U.S. just turned and walked away. And so Rouhani said, our choice is resistance only. So they're talking tough here. Over in Iraq, a prominent Shia cleric, leading politician, and two militia representatives all voiced opposition to a possible war with Iran, warning of apocalyptic consequences for Iraq. They're saying it would mark the end of Iraq. They said they need peace and reconstruction. I think we all need peace and reconstruction. Meanwhile, Mike Pompeo is sending tough talk to Iraq, saying, stand with us against Iran or move aside. And Pompeo warned Iraq leaders, if they're not going to stand with the U.S. against Iran, then they should just get out of the way. And I think this is his way of basically saying it's going to happen from your territory anyway, because, as you know, Baghdad is refusing their permission for the U.S. to conduct military operations against Iran from Iraq's soil. And in the next few days, Iraq's parliament is going to hold a vote on a resolution asking the United States to leave, which is expected to pass by a very, very wide margin. So we're going to wind up in a situation where the U.S. will be illegally occupying Iraq. And Iraq has been under U.S. military occupation for well over a decade, and they're tired of it right now. Pardon me. So the concern coming out of Iraq is that Baghdad will get caught again in the conflict between Washington and Tehran after recovering from the effects of its first war against Iran, which was instigated by the United States. They've been there, done that, didn't work out too well. They don't want to do it again. So Then there's the wild card out there that you need to think about. Muqtada al-Sadr, and along with other Iraqi clerics, basically made the statement that Iraqi Shiite figures warned a U.S. war against Iran would cause Iraq to burn. Now, here is the question. Muqtada al-Sadr is very popular. At one time, he was politically very powerful within Iraq. But the question is he still in communication with Iraq's military leaders? Because if he is, he could sort of get the band back together very, very quickly and become a major force. Now, at one point, Muqtada al-Sadr had warned that if the United States remained in Iraq past the agreed-to withdrawal date, which is come and gone, that U.S. forces would be targeted. So we'll see what's going to happen there. And we still don't know who fired that Katyusha rocket into the green zone. So, and nobody's claiming the Sunday night attack, but of course, over in Washington, D.C. Oh, had to be Iran. Absolutely had to be Iran. Couldn't be anybody else. We're going to do a shout out now to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. We're talking about this schizophrenic policy towards Iran. Article that came on out of CNN, no less. The current war of words between Iran and the United States is basically an echo of the same U.S. strategy against North Korea. The Trump administration has this North Korea playbook, and they just changed the name, and they're doing the same thing. Box the adversary into a corner, then try to negotiate, respond to a threat by escalating your own threat, then negotiate to alleviate tensions and claim that they have won. So we'll see what happens with that. Another article, this one coming out of Al Jazeera. Iran and the West, can Europe restrain the United States? And it starts out by saying there is a definite schism that has opened up between the United States and Europe over Iran. And it reminds a lot of people of the friction over Iraq prior to the 2003 U.S.-led invasion. The current dispute is mainly over means, not ends. And both the EU and U.S. would like to see the Ayatollah's Iran contained and constrained, preferably under new leadership, read regime change, just as they wanted to see Saddam Hussein's Iraq before 2003. But as in the past, they disagree on how to go about it. To put it simply, it is a dispute over carrots or sticks, whether to bring Iran to its senses or bring Iran to its knees. Now, the Europeans prefer the carrot approach. They want to use trade and investment in accordance with the Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action, while the U.S., of course, pulled out and is starting to wave their sticks all over the Persian Gulf area. Tough sanctions, the threat of force. And before we get into that, though, you need to remember 17 years ago, there was a war games conducted that showed a maritime matchup with the U.S. Navy against tactics similar, though, that Iran would use, the small, fast patrol boats. Because the United States has a spotty record when it comes to asymmetrical warfare, and this war games conducted 17 years ago showed it was going to go very bad for the Navy. The Navy would win, but it would be a Pyrrhic victory. Or I guess in this case it would be a water victory because they would sink. So basically there are now new reports coming on out that Iran is pursuing new missile activity in the region as it prepared to commemorate the U.S. unilateral pullout from the 2015 nuclear deal. And they're going to step back some of their commitments to the historic agreement. And then they repeat that claim about satellite images, which we're not allowed to see, show Iran loading missiles onto their small patrol boats. Which, by the way, if you know the kind of kick that comes out of that missile exhaust, it's a one-shot deal. And Iran has already come on out and said, no, we couldn't do that. We don't have the capability. Meanwhile, here in the United States, the corporate media is doing their job of bamboozling you and swindling you into supporting yet another war. The Washington Compost editorial headline from the 14th had the U.S. drifting toward war with Iran. Okay? This is how they spin it. You know, we don't really want the war, but we're drifting toward it, trying to imply that the world superpower has no agency over its own imperialism. And the corporate media, we know they're lying. They did, remember the run-up to the Iraq War, Saddam's nukes, things they later disavowed. People looking on the internet found that, yes, the media had in fact said those things. They even tried to go back and say, nobody ever said Saddam had nuclear weapons. Nobody ever said Saddam was involved with 9/11. Anyway, on the other side, we have this story, and it's actually a YouTube video, where Trump is saying the military-industrial complex is pressuring him into a war with Iran. And he said, yes, there is a military-industrial complex, and yes, they love war. And of course they love war. That's where they get their money from. If not actual war, preparing for war, building new weapons, stockpiling stuff. That's where they get their money. And so, yes, as part of their market development, if you will, they're always going to push for war. You're never going to see the defense contractors say, you know, maybe we ought to pull back on all of this, you know, warplane stuff and, you know, work on making our civilian aircraft a little bit better, like the 737 MAX 8, just to pick one example. Over in Yemen, the Yemeni Minister of Public Health and Population, Taha al-Matwaki, recently confirmed that at least 425 medical centers have been targeted by the Saudi-led coalition since this war began in Yemen in 2015. And they're still trying to call it a civil war, but that's not what happened. Several years ago, the United States executed a successful regime change in Yemen. Then the people of Yemen decided they didn't like living under foreign puppet rule, and they kicked the internationally approved U.S.-installed puppet government out. And so the U.S., using Saudi Arabia as a proxy, is trying to basically slap down the people of Yemen so that they will accept and love their foreign puppet rule. When they talk about the Houthi rebels, they're talking about the people of Yemen. So anyway, getting on back to the Yemeni ministry, says during the 4 years of war on Yemen, hospitals have been repeatedly targeted and destroyed by the Saudi-led coalition, which does not value human life and does not observe humanitarian principles. And all Yemeni people, including women and children, have been attacked in this war. And that certainly is true. Okay. Since the launch of Saudi Arabia's campaign against Yemen, it's killed thousands of civilians, and yet Riyadh continues to describe retaliatory attacks by Yemeni forces as acts of terrorism. Getting on back to Iran and making good on their threats to pull back from its commitments under the 2015 nuclear pact, Tehran has quadrupled its production of enriched uranium, according to Iran's Atomic Energy Organization. The increase was announced yesterday by a spokesperson for Iran's nuclear authority, Behrouz Kamalvandi, who told Iranian media the decision was made to counteract offensive sanctions. Not really sure that it's anything more than a symbolic gesture, because Kamalvandi declared Iran would not increase its number of centrifuges and that the uranium would now remain at its current level of enrichment at just over 3.5%. Now, before anybody starts getting worried about Iranian nuclear weapons, little something about nuclear enrichment. Uranium enriched to 3.5% is at the low end of being usable for reactor fuel for nuclear power stations. Weapons-grade uranium, the stuff that will spontaneously go bang when you slap it together, has to be enriched to above 90%. So, as I said, this looks to be more of a symbolic gesture than anything else. All right. During March and April, Israel blocked access roads to 4 Palestinian villages in the West Bank, and the army closed gates it had placed at the entrances to the villages for periods of between 5 and 20 days at a time. The affected communities were Azan, east of Kolkilia, Kifa Hares, northwest of Salfit, Deir Istaya, east of Salfit, and Tuku, southeast of Bethlehem. Now, the measures were taken, according to the Israeli army, because there were allegations Palestinian residents from the villages had thrown stones or Molotov cocktails at settler vehicles on local roads. So that was it. And once again, there has been a incursion, if you will, to the Al-Aqsa compound, led by Israeli Minister of Agriculture Uri Ariel, and basically took another group of extremist Israeli settlers on a tour of the holy site. This is intentionally provocative. And the tour took place hours after the Israeli police forcibly evicted hundreds of Muslim worshippers. Now, similar tours by Israeli politicians and lawmakers in the past have led to tensions and clashes between the Israeli forces on the one side and the Muslim worshippers and the Jordan-run Islamic Waqf personnel who are in charge of running the compound on the other. Story coming out of Desert Peace saying that simply trying to buy the Palestinians acquiescence to the deal of the century is not going to work. Palestine needs to be a state. And they're not just talking about human rights, they're talking about economic rights too, rights to their own economic assets, land, water, natural gas wells, Dead Sea and Mediterranean Sea shores, borders, and the like, and the ability to employ them within a Palestinian-defined economic development plan free from Israel or donor aid agendas. Dumping more humanitarian and development funds to the Palestinian coffers will not solve the conflict. And Steve is absolutely correct on that one. Okay, Israeli soldiers have arrested a Dutch politician, Tanuhan Kuzu. He's the leader of the Dutch political party Denk and a parliamentarian. And he was arrested Friday walking toward the Al-Aqsa Mosque carrying a Palestinian flag. Now, I was unaware that carrying a Palestinian flag is an arrestable offense, but they've arrested him anyway, and of course, that's going to trigger a bit of a diplomatic row. Now, here's an interesting analysis over in Middle East Eye. And it concerns an interview with Berlin-based political economist Shir Hever, talking about the reason behind Germany's condemnation of the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, where the German parliament deemed BDS as anti-Semitic and illegal, making it the first and only country in the world to actually criminalize the BDS movement. And Hever says it's easy to understand. Are we okay? Okay. Strange sounds out there. Anyway, Hever says what's going on here is that Germany is going along with all of this to basically deal with their guilt over the Holocaust. Now, nobody alive in Germany today, or hardly anybody alive in Germany today, was present when all that went down, when whatever it has happened, happened. Modern-day Germans born after the war shouldn't be made to feel guilty, individually or collectively. That's the tool that's used to manipulate them. I refuse to feel guilty about anything that happened before I was born or outside of my direct control. Not my problem, and I'm not going to feel guilty. Okay, we got to take a break here for commercials. We got a caller waiting on the line, and we will be right back.
4-3.
And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're going to go to the phones now to Tom in Florida. Aloha, Tom. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, Michael. Good day to you. Great show. Yeah, Michael, first off, I really didn't call about this. I called about something else. But I'm going to tell you real quickly about German. The Germans have nothing to be ashamed of. The most population of this country are Germans. There's more Germans in this country, the United States of America, than any other ethnic group, number one. Number two, if it wasn't for the Nazis, you wouldn't have that. Canaveral, you wouldn't have had Alabama, Houston, you wouldn't have had a Apollo 11 rocket going to the moon. You would have never set a man on the moon.
Well, Tom, hold on. Okay. The fact of the matter is there was a lot of rocket research that was going on in the United States before they grabbed the German rocket scientists. And yes, the Germans were very good. They helped the U.S. program just as they helped the Soviet program. But the fact of the matter is we had people like Robert Goddard. And he in the rush to fawn at the feet of Werner von Braun. The fact of the matter is that Goddard has been sort of sidelined, and he didn't deserve that. I mean, von Braun was a very vain man, and he self-promoted himself.
I was going there. I was going to say, Michael, Goddard was a great rocket scientist. There was no question about it. But it was the Nazis who put us on the moon. Let's not kid ourselves. Werner von Braun, he was the head of NASA, along with the other gentleman, I can't remember his name right now, that ran Cape Canaveral. The Germans had a big influence on our weaponry. The stealth
yes, they did. They had an influence on our weaponry and our space program. Tom,
yeah.
My turn.
Yep.
Yes.
Okay.
Operation Paperclip brought a lot of people over from Germany that had a lot of influence on weaponry, rocketry, our space program, a lot of other stuff. Tape recorders were a war prize from Germany. Cryptography with the Enigma machines and everything.
Correct.
But this idea saying that the Nazis put us on the moon, there were a lot of Americans who worked on the Apollo moon program, including yours truly, and I most assuredly am not a Nazi.
Well, Michael, I agree with you. I didn't mean it to say that the Americans. Of course, it was the Americans who did it, but I'm saying they needed a helping hand. But I did call about, my point was, I think you'll agree with this, Michael. When it came to World War II and the actual men who went into battle for the United States against the Germans, it was predominantly German Americans. Predominantly, most of the men who went to Germany to fight that battle and the Bulge and all that, most of those gentlemen who went to that war were German Americans who had German blood in them. Are we lying about that? I'm not lying about that, Michael. I'm just telling you the fact. There was a lot of Englishmen, there was Frenchmen, but most of the men in this country, of the United States of America, under David Dwight Eisenhower and Truman and all that, they were German men of German blood who were Americans, whose families been here for generations. That's what I was trying to get the point is. But, Michael, and that is the main point, actually, when you look at the Battle of Germany and how Germany lost. They lost because they were German blood, predominantly. Not all, like you said. Those Americans who put the man on the moon, no question about it. Goddard was a wonderful rocket scientist. He was spectacular. But Germans, von Braun, and there's a bunch of other, but Paperclip, like you said. I watched the documentary. I was really amazed by it. But, Michael, the real reason I called you is about Dr. Ben Carson. Have you been seeing what's going on with this gentleman?
No, have not been following him.
Okay, Dr. Ben Carson is the head of the HUD. They've been attacking this man yesterday and today like crazy because he says the illegal aliens do not deserve to have Section 8 housing. He's 100% correct. Now, that's going to be really interesting when when this really come now election time, when Ben Carson, an Afro-American who's running HUD, say, hey, listen, we're going to start taking care of Americans first. White, black, whoever's here legally in this country who needs the help with Section 8 housing, housing in particular. You got these Democrats who want illegal aliens to have Section 8 housing, food stamps, furniture vouchers. This is unbelievable. They're living and they get better medical health care than we do.
Yes.
You're talking about your wife. She should get the top line medical care in this country, not some illegal alien. They had a big article in the Miami Herald, Michael, where some of these kids are coming from Central America getting $300,000, $400,000 operations.
I know.
They're taking them to Jackson Hospital, giving them major operations. Well, what do you think about that?
Well, I'm in agreement with Ben Carson. I mean, the resources taken from the American people should be spent on the American people. That's actually written into the Constitution when they talk about apportionment. And the Democrats, of course, want the illegals to have the priority for all the free stuff. It's a way of buying votes. And that's how they're going to win in 2020. Or at least that's how they think they're going to win in 2020.
Exactly. Michael, getting back to World War II, you ever see the movie Saving Private Ryan? You see the end of the movie? You saw the movie Saving Private Ryan, right, by Spielberg?
No, I missed it. It's one of the few Spielberg films I didn't watch.
See the movie Saving Private Ryan. The thing that really sticks out in the end, when he's standing there, there'll be thousands of crosses, and you'll see just one Star of David for like every 5,000 markers where the dead soldiers are in the Arlington Cemetery in Washington. There'll be thousands of crosses, and you'll see once occasionally when the movie at the end he shows you a Star of David. Okay, so there were Jews that fought in World War II, absolutely. But the majority of the men who went from the United States of America, left this continent to go to a foreign country, which is Germany and Europe, whose family actually came from there, Michael.
Yes. Well, maybe they wanted to save Germany, their ancestral homeland. Anyway, Tom, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And before we go back to the phones here, I want to respond to a couple of things Tom in Florida said, and didn't have time before the commercial break here. Yes, Jewish soldiers were very few in the World War II Army, and that's because the Jewish population at that time in the United States was very, very tiny. Had nothing to do with the will or courage or anything to that. Second of all, absent Wernher von Braun, we would have gotten out into space eventually. There were a lot of people who were working on that problem. Wernher von Braun, because of his notoriety, was able to basically politic his way to the top. But he wasn't always the brilliant rocket scientist that he was made out to be. It was von Braun's decision to use a chimpanzee in the first test launch of the Mercury capsule. And that was what allowed the Soviet Union to put Yuri Gagarin into space and claim the prize of the first man in space. Von Braun also had pictured a single gigantic rocket that would fly to the moon and back, and had to be actively lobbied by a lot of other scientists to go with the eventual idea of a staged rocket that left empty parts of it behind to lower its weight as it went. So, and no doubt he was a brilliant man. He wasn't perfect. There were other people working on the space program. Okay, so let's go to the phones here. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Did you ever see there's a big statue in Russia of the space program? Russia's very proud of the space program. It's like a tall statue with a rocket on the top of it. They're very proud of that fact. Do we have anything like that here?
Well, first of all, Russia has every right to be proud of their space accomplishments. And as far as what we have, well, we have, I know there's a lot of monuments around the United States. They certainly have a few of them down at Houston, over at the Kennedy Launch Complex. I know there's a bunch of plaques in front of the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. As to whether we have a gigantic soaring monument, well, outside of the Statue of Liberty and Mount Rushmore, we're not really a giant monument kind of country. And I'll add into that list the Confederate monument that's carved into a mountain and the Crazy Horse Memorial.
Yeah, Mike, I got to respond to what Tom said. Like, sure, Germany has great, to this day, great technical people. I mean, great engineers, great scientists. But it doesn't excuse them for, like, the war crimes they did during World War II. Just
well,
like
it doesn't excuse the United States for the war crimes that we did in World War II.
Also in Vietnam, and in Korea, and in Iraq, and in Syria, up to date, basically. You know, we keep, you know, and if you go along with it, you're with the criminals, your government, and the people, the subordinates. All responsible. If you go along with the drunk driver and he drives over people and you don't stop him, then you're with the drunk driver as far as I'm concerned.
That's not a very good analogy, because in trying to take control of the car away from the drunk driver, you could cause a worse accident.
What about before you get in the car with the drunk driver, though?
Well, obviously that would be the best solution. Don't get into the car with a drunk driver. Take their keys away. Unless you're also drunk, in which case call a cab.
And also, Tom, do you realize we got into the war in Europe late? Like, we only fought 25% of the Wehrmacht and SS. The Russians defeated Nazi Germany.
Yes.
They lost 21 million people.
Yep.
That's why they have that parade every May 9th, the Great Patriotic War. You know, but that doesn't. They don't tell you that in our history books, the American history books. You know,
Yeah.
we defeated everybody. You know, we're the exceptional ones. We can defeat anybody. You know. Hey, Mike, you ever heard of something called Triffin's paradox?
Doesn't ring a bell.
It has to do with like countries who have if you have the world's reserve currency, you're always going to have deficits. If you look up Triffin's dilemma or Triffin's paradox, if you can read up on a little, I guess it's a theory by the guy or whatever. But and Mike, I wanted to also talk about Trump's tariffs. Now, they pulled back now for 90 days. Of course, it's not working out.
Yep.
So they gave a temporary reprieve. Yeah, it's amazing. You got to get a license from us to do business with. It's like Big Brother. You got to get a license to go out to the store. You got to get a license. But you need a permit for this. He's telling another country you need a permit. But Mike, do you realize Trump's tariff with the farmers? I talked about this yesterday. You're going to need $20 billion to bail out the farmers. Now, the tariffs bring in money for the government. Now, that money's going to go back out with Trump subsidizing the farmers for $20 billion. What a scam! It's a scam. You realize that?
Yes.
I mean, I just figured it out. I'm like, wait a minute. The money you're bringing in is probably less than you got to give out back to the farmers in subsidies, right?
It's a very unbalanced situation here. And I want to step on back, though, to what you were talking about, the Triffin dilemma. I'm looking at the Wikipedia page on it, and basically saying, yes, this was identified in the 1960s by Belgian-American economist Robert Triffin, pointing out the country whose currency, being the global reserve currency foreign nations wish to hold, must be willing to supply the world with an extra supply of its currency to fulfill world demand for those foreign exchange reserves, thus leading to a trade deficit.
That's it. And like I said, I don't think we can win this trade war because with the Belt and the Road, that will fill in. Like if the Chinese decide to say, you know what, U.S., make your own stuff now, the Belt and the Road can just fill in because we only get 16%. China, it's like 16%. People think like half of the Chinese, if the Belt and the Road, once that comes in, that 16% can be moved to other countries. They don't need us no more because they're internally becoming self-sufficient in terms of their own population buying their own products.
Well, what they're doing is, along with several other countries, is they're working to basically bypass the U.S. hegemonic domination. See, right now, backed up by its Navy, the United States exerts a great deal of control over the sea lanes of communication, and imposes, various port fees and tariffs and so on. And with that One Belt, One Road and that new Arctic trade route that Russia and China are putting together, the world is no longer dependent on U.S.-based shipping.
And by us doing this 90-day reprieve, this shows we got chinks in the armor. Like you just showed your cards. You can we can put tariffs on people, but just like with Xi Jinping, did you see what he said about the Long March today? He had this speech at a mining facility where it's a rare earth mining facility.
Yes.
And remember, you talked about it yesterday, and I mentioned it about the rare earth. That could be the tariffs they put up against us.
China's threatening to just cut off the United States completely from all the rare earths. We're going to be talking about that later in the show.
And Mike, that's 80% of the rare earth minerals come from China, and then also Russia supplies most of Boeing planes with titanium. So if you want a trade war, it's going to come back at you in different areas. All right, Mike, have a good show.
All right, thanks an awful lot here, and we're going to switch over to Don in Iowa. Aloha, Don. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, Mike, yes, I wanted to respond also to, I think the guy's name is Tom.
Yes.
In Florida, there was ranting. He gets real enthusiastic all the time, but I think he made the statement that the majority of the American soldiers were Germans. Didn't he say that?
That's the claim that he was making. I'm not sure how we would back that up. I mean, I had a lot of my family served in World War II in the European theater, and they were basically French and English blend.
Well, he's conflating the fact. It's true that German is the number one. It is now, and it was, I'm sure, then in 1940. It was the number one ethnic group. There are more Germans, more people who have German blood than have Irish blood or English blood. So German was the number one ethnicity, if you want to look at it that way. But that's not the same as saying most of it. It's not nowhere near 50% or more, like this guy was trying to say. So this guy, I mean, there's a lot of good German people were Americans, and they came over to this country. I mean, I didn't catch his whole argument of what he was trying to make, but he's definitely wrong on that one fact when he tried to say that most of the American soldiers were German. No way. But outside of that, that's about all I wanted to say. I'll catch you later, Mike. Thanks.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Don. We're going to switch over to Tony in Puerto Rico. Tony, aloha. Thank you for waiting so long. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hello, Mike. I want to talk a little politics. What do you think if the United States would get together with Russia and China and build a space station on the moon? Do you think that could help the world economy?
Not really, no. I mean, the technological fallout from mounting a project like that certainly would. I mean, much of the tech boom of the 70s, 80s, and 90s came out of the Apollo moon program and solving all those problems. I personally, as big as a space enthusiast as I am, I don't think a permanent base on the moon is really that great an idea. I mean, unless they find something there to mine that makes it worth the cost. I think a space station out in space is the better way to go because then you're not having to expend fuel and energy to basically deorbit from lunar orbit down to the lunar station and then reorbit back up. And even though it's certainly not as much fuel as having to leave the Earth's gravity well, it's still a lot more fuel that you have to carry along for the missions. And I know it sounds really good. It's an ambitious project and seen lots of illustrations about it. Economically, I don't think it's a great idea unless they find something on the moon that is worth the trip, like, helium-3 or something. Or maybe rare earth minerals now that we're about rare earth elements now that we're about to get cut off from China.
Okay, but how about as a jumping point to Mars?
Well, you can jump off to Mars a lot easier from a space station that's already in space as opposed to lifting off from the moon and then accelerating toward Mars.
Okay. Thank you, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Dave in Delaware. Aloha, Dave. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. How you doing today?
Doing fine.
Hey, you got a lot of anti-Nazi callers today, don't you, Mike?
Well, we've all been raised in a culture where they were the bad guys because they lost the war.
I know, right? Because, they always ask, why didn't the people of Germany stand up against Hitler, right?
Yes.
Maybe they didn't want to. Maybe they had it better. They liked the way everything was going.
Have you ever heard of the Order of the White Rose?
Have you ever heard of, I don't know, Nazi Germany, or how Ashkenazi is a term derived from the
Okay,
word
you didn't answer my first question. Have you heard of the Order of the White Rose?
I'm calling in asking you questions. Now you're trying to ask me questions.
I'm the radio show host, Dave. Have you heard of the Order of the White Rose?
Do you know that the term Nazi was derived from Ashkenazi?
Dave, you've called in with the same thing before, and no, Nazi was a contraction of National Socialist. I'm going to give you one more chance. Have you heard of the Order of the White Rose?
What is it?
Okay, it was an underground organization in Nazi Germany, this being before the days of the internet. They had printing presses, and they would basically print out leaflets and run along the rooftops in the cities of Germany and just throw them into the air for people to read. And this was at least one group of the German people who were trying to stand up to Adolf Hitler. Ultimately, they were all captured and beheaded. But it
Were
basically
they all communists or Bolsheviks?
Dave, you know something, Dave? I'm really getting tired of you. We're going to let you go and switch over to John in California. Aloha, John. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello there, Mike. I don't call your show often, but I listen quite a bit, and you've got another great show. And I just wanted to make a comment about your previous caller, Tom from Florida.
Yes.
Before not you necessarily, but any of your listeners starts demanding canonization to sainthood for Dr. Ben Carson, or tries to put a halo around his head, you might want to consider the fact that, and this is something I haven't heard anyone talk about on any show anytime. Anyway, he during the election, the last election, presidential election, he made the comment, and I heard him say it, that he is in favor of mandatory vaccinations, not just for children, but for all adults. And so I was listening to the Deanna Spingola show maybe about a month ago, and she had a guest on whose name escapes me. It doesn't matter, but she didn't seem to be aware of this. I could tell just by she was talking, so I called in, and I told her that, and Deanna seemed to think it was true, but she said, "Oh no, that's not true." So after the show, I went and did a browser search on the subject, and I think it's going to take me a long time to find the exact quote, because the consensus is of all the stories on that subject, he's all over the map as far as where he stands on vaccinations, on all the conditions involved. And so just tell people they should start thinking about that if they want to. If they're against vaccinations and for their children, not to mention themselves, they ought to do a little more research on Dr. Ben Carson.
Well, see, here's the thing. We weren't canonizing him or recommending him for sainthood.
Well, I know that.
I was simply agreeing with this one particular decision that he has made, that America's resources have to go to the legal American citizens first. And, I'm looking at an article here, this is from CNN, where Ben Carson is out there saying the vaccinations have to be spaced more apart in order to prevent autism. So, again, it's not like he's hardcore jab the needles in there. But again, it's really not appropriate to judge him on his comments about Section 8 housing by saying, oh, but look over here, he's advocating vaccines. That's a political attack. That's not a discussion of the merits of the case.
Yeah.
Anyway, I got to let you go. We got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. The phone lines are open, and getting on back to, almost dovetails with it. Over in Poland, as you know, there is this growing tiff between Israel and Poland, where Israel is now demanding that Poland compensate the descendants of displaced Polish Jews for the properties that were taken away from them. And Poland's reply to that is, no, that was done by the Germans and the Nazis, and we had nothing to do with it. And Israel's response to that is, oh, you helped them. You thought you didn't do enough to stop them. So anyway, the Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki has vowed that his country will never pay restitution for Jewish properties stolen during the Holocaust, saying that such a move would be a victory for Hitler. Not entirely sure about that one, but apparently last Saturday he was at a campaign rally and he doubled down, saying that his Law and Justice Party would not consent to claims of Holocaust restitution, telling voters, we will defend Poland. Now, regardless of what you think happened, it happened in the middle of the last century. In fact, in the first half of the last century. It is history. And with very rare exceptions, pretty much everybody involved in all of that are dead and gone. Okay. The Director General of Reporters Without Borders has announced yesterday that their analysis shows the Israeli army is deliberately targeting journalists in the occupied Gaza Strip. They're looking at the number of people who are being shot, and journalists are disproportionately representative. So Christophe Delors was speaking to the Jerusalem Post, having received the Dan David Prize in Tel Aviv on behalf of the International Press Freedoms Watchdog. And so Delors reminded everybody it is a war crime to target journalists because they are journalists. When Israel shot those journalists during the Great Return March protests, it was intentional. The journalists could be clearly identified. They had cameras and press jackets, and it would not just be by chance. They were being targeted. And everybody seems to be talking tough right now. Over in Pakistan and India, this Indian general is warning Pakistan not to try any cross-border military actions against Kashmir, saying that Islamabad will inevitably face a befitting reply from New Delhi should Pakistani forces engage in any misadventure. This came from Lieutenant General Ranbir Singh, commander of the Northern Indian Army, and the official made it very clear that any cross-border activity on behalf of the Pakistan military would be regarded as an affront to the Indian side. Now, that Kashmir dispute has been going on for a very, very long time, and they just sort of sit up there and up until recently half-heartedly kind of shoot at each other every once in a while. But it seems to be heating up rather dramatically over there. And it does feel like the whole world is getting ready to explode. So anyway, we're coming up here on our station identification break. And I should be hearing some music. There it is. Okay. All right. So we'll be back after these few words with hour number 2. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And before we get back to the news here, somebody just emailed me this graphic. It's from back in the year 2000, showing ancestry distributions. And it does confirm one thing that Tom did say. The majority of the states, Germans are the majority population. Same thing with the majority of the counties. It's a little hard to really analyze the data because where the Germans are living are states and counties with very low populations. And the heavy population centers are, of course, loaded up with, well, take Los Angeles, for example, Mexicans. Getting on back to the news here, yet again, a U.S. Navy Arleigh Burke-class destroyer sailed right next to a disputed shoal in the South China Sea, ignoring repeated warnings from Beijing to stay clear of the region amid rising tensions between the two economic superpowers. Apparently Sunday, the USS Preble, armed with Tomahawk missiles, sailed along the Scarborough Shoal in the South China Sea to challenge China's claim to the area. Now, Washington has repeatedly refused to acquiesce to Chinese protests over its incursions into the sea, citing the principle of freedom of navigation, which is a polite way of saying we can go wherever we want to and you can't stop us. Now, the way the rules have worked up until now, international law recognizes a 12-mile ocean boundary, that if you are less than 12 miles from the shore, you are in that country's territorial waters and you don't have permission to be there. The U.S. warships, of course, keep pushing that because they're sailing right along that 12-mile line. It's clearly another provocation. Now, here's an interesting little response coming from China. Apparently, a major Chinese TV broadcaster is pulling all Hollywood-produced films and even Chinese films with scenes shot in the U.S. from the schedules, replacing them with classic Chinese war films showing Chinese troops defeating Americans, and yes, it did happen. So China Movie Channel, better known as CCTV6, has begun filling its prime evening slots with classic anti-American Chinese war films. Heroic Sons and Daughters, produced in 1964. Battle on Shangling Mountain, produced in 1954. Surprise Attack, produced in 1960. And they're all going to be featured from May 17th. Well, I guess it already happened. But less revenues for U.S.-made movies. There's an interesting question. How do the tariffs affect residuals from American media being played in China? Music, TV, motion pictures. Okay, the Department of Homeland Security has sent out an alert yesterday, be on alert, saying that U.S. firms and government agencies face a potential data risk from Chinese-made drones. And the notice is titled, Chinese-manufactured unmanned aircraft systems warns that sensitive flight data might be sent all the way back to the manufacturers in China, where it can be accessed by the governments. And it's saying U.S. officials have strong concerns about any technology product that takes American data into the territory of an authoritarian state that permits its intelligence services to have unfettered access to that data or otherwise abuse that access. Boy, talk about the pot calling the kettle black when you look at how the NSA has unfettered access to all of our data, along with pretty much every cyber criminal you can find. Now, this is not about the data. This is another form of economic attack. This is another salvo in the trade war. China, and specifically the company DJI, is the top selling commercial drone manufacturer in the world with over $2 billion in sales. I'm sure their American companies would like to carve off a bit of that if they could make an equally good product at an equally good price here. All right, let's take a call from Peter in California. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, if I could respond to a couple of people who've talked about World War II and Russia and the United States and who won and all that kind of thing. It's kind of my thing, and you guys are both right. About 75% of casualties inflicted on the Germans, material and personnel, were inflicted on the Germans by the Russians. However, Stalin and Zhukov in memoirs later came out and said that, well, we don't know if we really could have won without the United States and to a much lesser extent Britain's economic help. So it was Russian blood that beat the Germans, but we gave them over 400,000 trucks. We almost fed them almost entirely with Spam and our wheat. We also gave them 11,000 tanks, but they made better tanks than we had anyways. We also gave them steel to make those T-34s. And we also shod with boots almost the entire Red Army. So what would have, and for a second front thing, when the Russians did the rollback of the Germans, and basically 43 and on, the American and Anglo-British air offensive had brought the the Russians were only facing about 20% of the German Air Force. The rest had been pulled back to defend against the bomber offensive, which of course was a war crime in itself, frankly. And the other thing was, in 44, when we went into D-Day, the Germans only had about 1,200. I'm sure you're aware of the 88 millimeter anti-aircraft and anti-tank gun.
Yes.
On the entire Russian front, but they had pulled so many back for anti-aircraft work, 7,000 were, so without the mobility that we gave them with both shoes, food, and trucks, and without the bomber offensive, which probably would have doubled or tripled the number of German planes that they were resisting, and 6 times or something more anti-tank guns, those 88 millimeters. It might have been a little harder, and Stalin and Zhukov both came out and said Zhukov came out in his memoirs published after the fall of the wall in the 90s, the updated version, that it would have been tough for the Russians to have won without us, but it would have been almost impossible for us to have beat the Germans on our own. There you go.
Yeah, well, that's the whole point of having allies in a war is, everybody provides what they're best at providing at. The US was best at providing bombs, and the Russians provided bodies.
Yeah, they sure did, and they were certainly willing, but it's pretty well established that that 24, 28 million, something in that area of casualties. At the end of the war, Stalin came out and said, and he just picked a number out at random, that they lost about 7 million people in the war. It sounded like a good round number, but of course later that was found to be just for disinformation against the Allies who were turning into adversaries. So,
yes.
At any rate, that's the deal on that, the American economy and the Russian soldier are what won World War II. That's what beat Germany.
Well, and the important thing to understand is right now we no longer have that economy. The economy we had in World War II was a manufacturing powerhouse. We were growing so much food, we were able to basically send it to the rest of the world. That doesn't exist anymore, which is why trying to go into a major war right now, we're going to lose this one.
I agree with you, Mike. I agree with you. It's sad to say, but we shouldn't be doing it from a moral and even strategic point of view. Really, it's not to our interest. It's Israel's interest, of course, to go into war with Iran and. Well,
there's a lot of interest. Let's not just dump it all on Israel. There's absolutely no doubt that Israel sees its own interests furthered by war with Iran. I don't know. Israel probably wouldn't mind if the U.S. and Russia destroyed each other with nuclear missiles. But there are other factors going into this war. The private central bankers, they want Iran under a private central bank. They want it. Oil companies want access to the oil. The U.S. wants Iran's oil sold only for the U.S. dollar. There's a lot of different players in this. Wars and assassinations don't happen for just one reason. There's usually an overlap of several.
I'm sorry, one more, if I can rebut that. The bankers are Israel, frankly. At least they're allied with them. They're much the same people. The oil guys, we're putting sanctions on them at Israel's behest because the oil guys would love to go in and drill in Iran and get Iranian oil. They would love that. They don't want their insurance prices going up, negotiating a mined Strait of Hormuz or Persian Gulf. The oil interests, they want peace.
Yes.
This is coming out of the fifth column and Israel and the press that is driving it.
All right, can we back up here a bit?
You're right about that.
Okay, when you say the bankers are aligned with Israel, and certainly there's a lot of interconnections, but you have to look at what their goals are. As far as the government of Israel is concerned, their goal is to basically end Iran's regional rivalry. They want Iran broken the way that Iraq was broken so that Israel can project more power across the region. The bankers, they want profit. So they may be buddy-buddy, but there are two different agendas being brought to the war table.
Well, I think that's right, Mike. But they are some of the same people, I must say, as well.
Well, yes, there are some of the same people.
By the way, Mike, did you see that Mel Gibson's coming out with a new movie? Have you seen that?
Apparently he's already been called an anti-Semite again. Supposedly this is a movie, it's called Rothschild without the S, and I think that's what annoyed people the most. And it's basically a story about this ultra-rich family who kick out their youngest son and how he gets his revenge. Spoiler alert. And so, but already you've got Israel supporters saying, pass a law to ban this movie.
Yeah, can't talk about the Rothschilds. Ooh.
No, you can't.
There we go. That's it for me. But it's interesting. Poor old Mel Gibson can't get a break to save his butt.
Well, I think he's had a pretty good career. You know, I mean, he survived his clash with the powers that be a lot better than I did. Anyway, Peter, thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to let you go. The phone lines are now open. We're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates rejoining our network. So turning now down to Venezuela, the Venezuelan ambassador to Russia, Carlos Rafael Faria Tortosa, has said earlier today that despite the ongoing blockade by the United States, Venezuela has found ways to get around them and start to rebuild the nation's economic conditions. Now, here's a very interesting article that came out of Zero Hedge, and it talks about the us versus them narrative and how it has just taken over Twitter, Facebook, political blogs, economic blogs, corporate media, and they're really trying to sell us that we have to choose sides, that we have to believe our side is good, the other side is evil. And as the American empire continues its decline, the people are being manipulated through Bernaysian propaganda techniques honed over the course of decades by the ruling oligarchs to root for their assigned puppets. Unfortunately, the sad majority of people can't discern that they're being manipulated and being duped, less so than before, for example, 9/11. And right now, the most terrifying possibility for the deep state controllers would be for the population to realize it is us versus them. The them that is evil are the ones who have hijacked our country to their own nefarious purposes of greed and war. Now, this is kind of interesting. This is coming out of Great Britain, and there is this company that has developed and is testing what is called a flapless drone. And the idea is that it is undetectable by radar. It's called the Magma, and it's capable of maneuvering without the traditional wing flaps found on aircraft, which very often are where radar will get their strongest return. And they're maneuvering the aircraft through the use of air that's blown from its engine through special slots in the wings at supersonic speeds. So they've built a prototype, and it was developed by researchers from Manchester University with assistance from engineers at BAE Systems, and they had a successful test flight out of the Landbetter Airport in northwest Wales. Over in Belgium, their defense minister is slamming the United States because they're in the middle of negotiations to buy some F-16s, and the defense minister is saying the price is higher than expected, and as far as they can tell, it's wholly unjustified. They're going to continue negotiations on the purchase of Lockheed Martin's aircraft, but they're not at all happy with the way they're being treated. Okay, let's turn to our domestic politics because there are some interesting things happening. Loretta Lynch, former Attorney General, is now accusing former head of the FBI of misrepresenting key Clinton probe conversation, and says she was quite surprised by his testimony. And basically the issue comes down to Comey alleging under oath that Loretta Lynch privately instructed him to call the Hillary Clinton email probe a matter instead of an investigation. Remember when that was all going down? And Lynch is saying that no, she never ever said anything like that at all. So one of them is lying. Now, because Comey was under oath, if he lied, it's a much more serious situation. If Loretta Lynch lied, nothing's going to happen. But this marks the latest public dispute to break out among these high-level ex-Obama administration officials. They're starting to claw at each other in the face of all these government reviews of potential FBI and Justice Department misconduct. I'd love to see more of it. I'd love to see them turning on each other and saying, so you were the one who arranged the Steele dossier. Judicial Watch has announced that it filed a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit against the Department of Justice seeking draft copies of FBI charts containing the information on potential statutory violations committed by Hillary Clinton in the former Secretary of State's use of a non-secure, non-government email server to conduct government business. Now, we know there's a list out there because Comey actually quoted from it during that notorious press conference where he went down this laundry list of Title 18 violations. and then said, we're not recommending prosecution because she didn't mean to do bad things, which if you actually know Title 18, intent is not required. Exposing classified documents through negligence, stupidity, accident, all of it can result in prosecution. So Judicial Watch has filed this lawsuit because, as usual, the Department of Justice failed to respond to a normal Freedom of Information Act request last December. So the fight is going to be on. They want the entire list of everything the FBI was looking at relative to Hillary Clinton. And the big news is Nancy Pelosi is out there taking the lead, demanding Trump impeachment proceedings. She's basically excoriating the current speakers in action. And so she's taking her own leadership team, demanding the Trump impeachment proceedings. And they're basically focusing on the fact that White House counsel Don McGahn is refusing to comply with the Judiciary Committee subpoena to testify. And that is going to be what they're going to seize on to launch an impeachment hearing. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. So basically, Nancy Pelosi is taking the banner, if you will, in the call for impeachment proceedings. And apparently the issue that they're going to try and use is the fact that the Trump administration instructed former White House counsel John McGahn to refuse to comply with the Judiciary Committee subpoena to testify, which the Democrats are saying that's obstruction of justice right there. And it is in a very gray area when you consider, is the Judiciary Committee actually a court of law? No, it isn't. But there's the issue of congressional oversight. So Nancy Pelosi is out there screaming impeachment. And at least 5 members of Pelosi's leadership team, 4 of whom also sit on the House Judiciary Committee with jurisdiction over impeachment, pressed Pelosi in a closed-door meeting to allow the panel to start an impeachment inquiry, which they argued would help investigators obtain documents and testimony that Trump has blocked. So apparently Pelosi is going to hold a special meeting tomorrow morning on the issue of impeachment. And by the way, let me backtrack here a little bit coming out of the commercial break. Yes, RBN needs your help. And the postal address to send a check, money order, or if you prefer anonymity cash, is Republic Broadcasting Network, 2251 Double Creek Drive, number 302, Round Rock, Texas, 78664. The phone number where you can make a credit or debit card donation or pledge to be a recurring subscriber is 800-724-2719, extension 1 during business hours, extension 3 at all other times. So let's go to the phones now to Al in Canada. Aloha, Al. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike.
Hi.
The reason this is going on, these new impeachment proceedings, or whatever you want to call it, they know the boat's sinking. The walls are closing in on them.
Yes.
Hillary Clinton has been in politics for, almost 50 years. She's a lawyer. She knew exactly what she was doing. That email server.
Yes.
She knew what she was doing. And that's a fact. She knew it was illegal.
Yes.
Like you said, intent. I don't see a problem here. I mean, I don't see a reason why they shouldn't be handcuffing this woman right now as we speak.
Well, she's clearly an untouchable. She's protected certainly by CIA, FBI, and Department of Justice. She knows where all the dead bodies are buried and how they got to be dead bodies. And she's basically got much of the government by the short and curlies at this point. And that's why she's able to get away with all these things through all these years and not pay any price for it. And to add insult to injury, there is still talk that she's going to step into the 2020 race.
The Department of Just Us.
Yes.
That's what it really is. And, I've called before and said I was Trump this, Trump that. The last couple of months or so, I've kind of taken a different stance. But all in all, I mean, it could have been a lot worse, right?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, up here in Canada, Mike, our Prime Minister wants to partner with kind of like New Zealand and social media, right?
Yes.
Which is kind of like what, fascism. And, you know, join in on China's social credit score scam is what I'm thinking.
Yep.
So, you know, I don't know if you know what, Mike? I'm not absolutely sure I'm happy that I'm getting old or I'm young. I don't know which I you know, because obviously as you get old, you want to be younger. But I'm actually kind of happy my time's coming to an end, because this is getting really scary.
You know, I've heard that from other people like Layla, and, you know, I'm not happy about getting old either, but I understand your sentiment. You know, we're heading toward a world I would not want to live in.
Yes, yes. And the sad thing is the younger folk, they're so indoctrinated, like they believe this stuff, like government is good and we should all pay for each other. And you know, to a certain extent, I don't mind that sort of thing, but there has to be limits on everything. And just because you run for a government and, you know, you work for that government for, let's just say, like 6 years, it shouldn't allow you to not worry about retirement and your health, because you have health care, you have, you know, a pension, a gold-plated pension, all those golden parachute things. Something is seriously wrong. We know it's seriously wrong, and no one's willing to do anything about it.
Or they don't even want to talk about it because they know they can't do anything about it. That's why they, you know, distract us with, you know, what restrooms we're supposed to use. Anyway, listen, Al, got to let you go. Got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And Nancy Pelosi is having this meeting tomorrow where they're going to launch an impeachment inquiry. It's another fishing expedition. And this is going to come down to a he said situation where did Trump actually order his counsel to ignore the subpoena? And it's going to be a big economic Gordian knot here. Now, obviously, pretty much every Democrat is on board. Let's impeach him. Let's get rid of him, blah, blah, blah. But Republican Representative Justin Amash kind of shocked everybody when he came out saying that Trump should be impeached. And Amash published a Twitter thread that came to various conclusions on the Russian collusion investigation. Chief among them that President Trump has engaged in impeachable conduct. Doesn't exactly say what the impeachable conduct is, just take my word for it. Well, this triggered an immediate primary challenge. Republican Michigan State Representative Jim Lauer announced he will mount a challenge to Amash's seat, which he's held since 2011, specifically citing the comments in support of impeachment. So, a little bit there. Okay, Democratic presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg was up there in Iowa talking to a crowd of supporters at a brewery, and asked whether the United States has a plan to win the ongoing trade war with China. The crowd's response was no. And so it looks like in the heartland in Iowa, Trump's economic policies are losing him voters. And I think back to that Tucker Carlson broadcast where he said, it's almost like Trump is going through the motions of a re-election, but he doesn't want another 4 years. And if that's that, and I tend to agree. I'm not seeing Trump really paying attention to the needs of the American people to win back their votes. See, the first time he ran, people liked him because he was an outsider. He was not a professional politician. He's a great speaker, great salesman. Well, by the time we get to the 2020 elections, those advantages are going to be gone. He's turned into a professional politician. He's broken pretty much every campaign promise he made. He's not an outsider any longer. He has been absorbed into the Borg that we call Washington, D.C. Speaking of Donald Trump, Trump wants an end to national injunctions from lower courts. And there was a story that came out. Trump seeks to limit judges' powers on injunctions after legal blows. And it's being spun as another case of a petulant president seeking to shed long-standing norms when he can't get what he wants. Now, the reality is a lot more complicated. Trump is looking to stop lower courts from being able to issue wide-ranging injunctions that affect the entire nation. And the plan comes as groups opposed to Trump have been able to get several of his policies, including those seeking to limit immigration, put on hold by nationwide orders issued by lower courts in battles that have to make their way slowly up the chain to eventually be decided by the Supreme Court. And during that whole time that it's happening, the immigrants continue to pour on in. All righty. So let's get to the economic news here. And let's start with the trade war with China, because it's about a lot more than just trade. It's about geopolitics. And it has everything to do with President Xi Jinping's visit to a memory chip plant in the city of Wuhan in early 2018. He was in a white lab coat. He made a tour of the clean room where the chips are being fabricated. And he made this remark comparing a computer chip to a human heart, saying no matter how big a person is, he or she can never be strong without a sound and strong heart. And what is really going on is that there is now a feud on who's going to be the leader in next generation technology. And China has been gaining on us, no question. They're ahead of us in several areas. They're making gains in artificial intelligence. And in order to make those gains in artificial intelligence, they have to be able to design and manufacture cutting-edge chips domestically. And that's why Xi Jinping has pledged at least $150 billion with a B to build up the sector. Now, China's plan has alarmed the U.S., and these computer chips have become the central battlefield in the trade war between the two countries. A lot of this goes back to the offshoring that took place here in the United States, going back to the late 1980s, 1990s, when American manufacturers said, we don't need to make the stuff here. We can have it made for less money over in, well, for example, China. And so the United States lost most of its chip manufacturing capability. When Seymour Cray was designing one of the last machines that he designed before he passed away, he didn't even go to the American manufacturers. He went right to Asia and said, I need chips that can do this. So we're in a very similar situation that Britain and Germany were in prior to both World War I and World War II. Germany was this manufacturing powerhouse. Britain could not compete. So Britain's response was to gin up a war and smash Germany so that Britain could go on being top of the world. Because apparently using war to knock your competition down is a lot easier than actually trying to compete on a level playing field. Story coming on out from Investment Watch blog that China tariffs could force widespread store closures and put $40 billion in sales at risk. Prices are going to rise on everything from toys to clothing. And this is coming from a report by UBS. And they're saying tariffs could cause over half of this change in 1 year rather than 4. So, Fred's store closing 104. CVS, Payless, and Victoria's Secrets are some of the brands that are closing. They closed the Victoria's Secret. No, that was Fredericks of Hollywood. They closed down there. They all look alike. Now here's where trade gets hardballed. and we mentioned this briefly in the phone call, China is threatening to cut off the U.S. supply of rare earth elements. And that is a very potent way for China to strike back. Now, these rare earth elements are essential for modern high tech, and China has most of them. China accounts for more than 90% of global rare earth mine production. And these rare earth elements are used in weapons, cell phones, hybrid cars, and even magnets. So China accounts for more than 90% of production. Rare earth elements such as scandium, yttrium, and 15 other minerals are sought after for their unique technology applications. But their scarcity means those countries lucky enough to contain them hold significant sway over the global supply. Now, China is very much in number one. Other countries able to produce rare earth elements, but nowhere near to the same amount, are in order: United States of America, India, Russia, Australia, Vietnam, Brazil, and Malaysia. If China does that, it is going to be a shock to our high-tech sector. Story coming out of government slaves here: the trade talks are dead. China doesn't even want to talk to us anymore. So U.S. consumers should brace for a long, bitter, and painful trade war with China. The timing absolutely sucks, because the indications are we're going into a recession as well, and the trade war and the higher prices resulting therefrom are only going to make things worse. This was poorly planned. Somebody should have told Trump, look, we've got to weather this recession first, get back on track, and then we can have a trade war. Or maybe somebody told Trump and he just wasn't listening. Over at the Chicago Federal Reserve, they're saying that the index points to slower economic growth in April. They're not the only ones to be saying that. Carmageddon is finally catching up with Tesla. Their bonds have collapsed and their stock has dropped below $200. And apparently, Wedbush published a research report saying the company faces a Kilimanjaro-like uphill climb to hit its profitability goals for the second half of the year. And of course, having some of those Teslas spontaneously combust is not helping the situation either. So, and again, these are costly cars. I know the Tesla Model 3 was aimed at the lower end of the market, but it's still an expensive car. Gerald Celente is out there saying, yes, you need to be ready for a recession. Back in 2008, Wall Street experimented with this little financial device called the subprime mortgage. And the idea was to go on out and offer mortgages to people who didn't really qualify for them. But the idea was, well, we'll get them in there, get them into the payment plan. And the subprime mortgages were offered with very low teaser rates. And then, of course, there was a rate adjustment partway in and people got trapped. And it led to this complete crash of the mortgage-backed security fraud. Having learned absolutely nothing from that, because the American people got to pick up that mess, Wall Street is now invested in the subprime auto loan. And we're seeing the same thing happen again. Auto loan defaults have reached the sky-high rates of the financial crisis. But they're saying, why is this happening if we're in the strongest labor market years? Well, because obviously the claim that we're in a strong labor market is another deception to try and keep us happy and complacent and in our place. It's like this idea of single-digit unemployment. If that were really the case, we'd be seeing wages and salaries going up to attract workers. But we're not. And that tells us it's a lie. Right now here in the United States of America, household debt has hit $13.6 trillion with a T as student loan and credit card delinquencies rise. I'll bet those students over at Montrose College are very happy about the good stroke of fortune they have here. New York taxi drivers are in serious economic trouble. And before you raise your hand, no, we're not talking about Uber and we're not talking about Lyft. We're talking about a predatory system that entraps the cabbies in a huge amount of debt. So basically, in order to drive a yellow cab in New York, you have to buy a medallion. This is a city permit that lets them own a yellow cab. And there's this cottage industry of sketchy loans, and artificially high medallion prices have ruined the dream for a generation of drivers. The drivers, who are mostly immigrants, bought the medallions by taking out unaffordable loans that included high fees and a ceding of many of their legal rights. The medallion prices literally are $1 million. And drivers had to refinance for even more money. The medallion bubble burst in 2014, and the drivers were ruined, and the crushing debt remains. Okay. All right, over in West New York, in the city of Buffalo, Tesla has a solar cell plant, and the original idea was that they were going to manufacture solar panels for the roofs of houses, but that market has softened. In a lot of places, it's actually becoming harder to put solar cells on your property. When solar first came to Hawaii, there were tax incentives and people were putting it up. And then Hawaiian Electric went to the state government and said, look, we're losing money. With everybody switching over to solar, we could be out of business. And then Hawaii reversed itself and made the application process for getting solar panels very, very difficult. And a lot of companies that had started up to install and service solar cells have now gone out of business. There's a lot of competition up there. So apparently, this plant in Buffalo, New York, the majority of their manufactured product is no longer being sold in the American market. They're being exported and sold overseas to, quote, a large Asian buyer, according to a report from Reuters. So that's not looking good. The oil industry has sent a warning to Washington over the Venezuela sanctions. And they're saying that the proposed oil sanctions against Venezuela could hurt domestic companies and consumers. And the reason for that has to do with the way oil is being refined. And when you build a refinery, generally it is built to handle a specific type of oil as feedstock. And many of the refineries currently in the United States are built to process heavy Venezuelan crude. And there are practically no other sources of the supply for this type of oil. So that means literally tearing the refineries apart and retooling them for Brent crude, light sweet crude, whatever else is out there. So these oil and petrochemical makers are saying to Trump, please don't do this, because it's going to harm domestic companies and domestic consumers. I remember when I lived in Los Angeles looking at some of those refineries, which huge, huge complexes. We actually have a refinery right here on Oahu. It's off there down on the southwestern corner. It's not a big one, but it's enough. Speaking of oil and gas, one country that could win from the U.S.-China trade war turns out to be Australia, which basically is an exporter of liquefied natural gas, and that made up about 42% of Australia's exports. So the longer this trade war goes on, the better it is for the Australian economy and the Australian people. So, okay, we're coming up here on another commercial break, and we'll be back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking about the economic news. And over at Boeing, their problems just keep getting worse because now China Eastern Airlines is demanding compensation from Boeing over the losses they have suffered over the compulsory grounding and suspended delivery of 737 MAX aircraft since March. And they're basically saying that the grounding has caused relatively big losses to China Eastern. And with the passing of time, related losses will further expand. So the Shanghai-based airline didn't specify precisely how large the required compensation is, and they're monitoring Boeing's work to fix the safety risk of the 737 MAX aircraft. I think the damage is done. Before the grounding happened, we were already hearing about passengers were saying, I don't want to be on a 737, put me on a different flight. The damage has definitely been done there. Well, they can repaint them and sell them for military use, I'm sure. Wouldn't be the first time that a disgraced civilian passenger jet was repurposed that way. Dress Barn is closing all of their 650 stores. So tell me again how this economy is doing really, really good. Okay, let's talk about what's going on with the European elections, because Europeans are coming up within this next week on the Eurozone elections. And Europeans may be able to gauge how high the tide of populism and nationalism has risen within their countries and on their continent. For all the returns that will be in from 3 days of elections in the 28 nations, the expectation is the nationalists and populists will turn in the strongest performance since the EU was established. And their parliamentary group, Europe of Nations and Freedom, could sweep a fourth of the seats in Strasbourg. Now, Nigel Farage's new Brexit party is predicted to run first in the British elections, winning 2 to 3 times the votes of the ruling Tory party of Prime Minister Theresa May. So that will be exciting to watch here. Half, according to the latest YouGov poll. So, according to this poll, Brexit party, 36%, which is an increase of 26% since the last poll. Plaid Cymru came in at 19%, that's a 4% increase. Labour received just 15%, half of what it previously polled at, followed by the Liberal Democrats at 10%. The Green Party received 8% of the vote. The Conservatives saw a disappointing 7%. UKIP received 2% of the vote. So the writing looks to be on the wall. It would take a massive amount of election fraud to undo this. Okay, so we're going to take a break for station identification. Back with hour number 3 after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. And we have a caller on the line, Dan in Illinois. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, I'm Mike. Yeah, I called yesterday. I was talking about the open cornfields unplanted and stuff.
Yes.
But on my way back, too, I drove through Belvedere, Illinois, and they got the Chrysler plant there, and their holding yard, which is huge, I mean huge, was full of Jeep models, all kinds.
Yes.
And there were none loaded on the rail cars there, and there were none over in the holding area for the truck transports. And they just laid off the whole third shift, like 100 and some people, and they were getting ready to lay off another 50 after these layoffs. So it's not looking too good for the car industry.
No, it really isn't. And of course, we know that because down at the bottom of the hill, we have the remains of this 4-screen drive-in movie theater. And when we first moved to where we live now, it was being used for a weekend flea market. Actually, they had a farmer's market on Wednesdays. That's all been shut down, and it's being rented out as an overflow lot for the island dealerships, and it is jam-packed. It is absolutely jam-packed. people just don't have money, and they don't want to take out more loans. They're concerned about being able to pay them back. It's a very scary time right now.
It is. I got a 14 Fusion. I really like it. I keep getting offers from the dealerships, but between making the payments and upping my insurance more than what I pay now, I can't do it. I'm 63 years old.
Yes.
So I can't. I would love to go down there and get grab another Fusion because I really like those. And but like I said, I can't. The increase in insurance and tagging along with some payments, I just can't do it.
No, I understand. I understand exactly. I mean, we were very, very lucky following our Honda getting stolen and stripped. We fell into an amazing deal on a car, and I really like it, and we are going to take it with us when we move to the mainland later this year.
Yeah, you gotta keep them going and baby them. Because I just took that trip to Florida and back, and tomorrow I'm going to get another oil change, and I got an oil change before I went down there. So you gotta baby them, take care of them.
Well, that may be a little too much oil change. In fact, I saw a story the other day about how recommend an oil change every so many thousand miles is just a way of selling more oil. The next time I need to change the oil on my car, I'm going to get one of those synthetics that lasts an entire year. Because, I don't get the thrill out of getting under the hood that I used to.
No. I was thinking of checking out that AMS oil or some sort of synthetic like that,
Yeah. Okay, well, Dan, thanks for the information. Yep. And, it's... You got to stop reading government reports and watching TV, and you got to look out the window to see what conditions are really like in this country. And they're bad.
Yeah.
They're very bad, and they're getting worse.
Pay attention to what you see. You got to pay attention to what you see when you're driving down the road.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, thanks an awful lot, Dom. We're going to let you go. Getting on back over to Brexit. Apparently, Theresa May has made a statement on her latest Brexit offer to members of Parliament, which includes giving members of Parliament a chance to vote on holding a new Brexit referendum. If at first you can't cheat your way through, try again. And of course, the Brexiteers are absolutely furious about that. They've had the referendum. Brexit won. And I would imagine that the British people are getting very, very impatient at the government clearly dragging its heels and trying to find some way to bypass the will of the people. Now, apparently the BBC, in their own inquiry, found that, yes, they had a pro-EU bias. And the report was written by an independent balanced panel of Eurosceptics and Europhiles, and it did not suggest the BBC deliberately tried to bend its coverage in favor of the EU and against Eurosceptics. However, there was substance to the concern that the BBC suffers from certain forms of cultural and unintentional bias, and that despite the good intentions of its producers, nobody thinks the outcome is impartial. So it's a way for the BBC to say, we're biased, but we didn't mean to be. We didn't intend to do wrong. Nigel Farage is basically attacking the BBC, saying that the license fee has risen up our agenda after pro-Brexit politicians were snubbed on Sunday's The Andrew Marr Show. Okay, we're going to do a shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. So let's talk a little bit about immigration. Story coming out of womensystems.com. And they're looking at Trump's legal immigration plan, and they're saying that they find much to like about it. But the problem is it is misdirecting public attention from the illegal immigration crisis. So Trump seems to be taking the position of, I can't really fix it, so let's distract from it. And we'll try and reframe the immigration debate back in terms of legal immigration. 22 million illegal immigrants inside our country, competing for food, competing for jobs, voting Democratic. What's wrong with this picture? And making it even worse, down on the southern border, the processing centers for the illegals that are being caught coming across the border are full. In fact, they're overcrowded. So now the next step is that hundreds of migrant families will be flown on passenger jets to other processing centers in San Diego, possibly even Miami, Detroit, and New York. Between 120 and 135 migrants will depart from the Rio Grande Valley 3 times a week at a cost of $6,000 per flight. Once migrants arrive, they'll be processed and ordered to appear in immigration court at a later date. The reality is many of them fail to appear. Something happened up in Minnesota, at the University of Minnesota, at the light rail train, and was not reported by the corporate media. Apparently, there was a gang of Somali youths basically just started attacking innocent people waiting for the light rail train. And they were swinging hammers or pipes, and they're trying to hush it down because Minnesota is out there being protective of its prized diversity endowing Somali community. It isn't working out, is it? This whole globalism thing. Violence, illness, drugs, human trafficking. All right, here's a story, and it shows how government can go hugely wrong. Now, back in 1937, industrial hemp was banned in this country because of its similarities to marijuana. They look the same, but industrial hemp does not get you high. And a lot of people thought that industrial hemp was seen as a threat to the timber industry as paper mulch. But Donald Trump last December signed the Agricultural Improvement Act of 2018, legalizing industrial hemp on a national scale. But apparently 3 truckers in Idaho are looking at prison sentences for carrying it because the police pulled the trucks over, saw the industrial hemp in the back, assumed it was marijuana, and charged them. And they had no evidence that it was marijuana. They didn't test it until after the trial was over. And they broke their own law by transporting the plant across the state lines for testing because they couldn't test it there. They had to take it down to Kentucky. So the damage is done. They're looking at 5 years in prison. Somebody has got to step on in and say, look, they were transporting a perfectly legal crop. They shouldn't be going to jail. They should not even have been arrested. But, you know, you give somebody a uniform and a badge and they just feel like they have to go on out and arrest somebody for something, even if it's completely imaginary. Okay, we're going to go to a phone call. Jerry in Chicago, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you for taking my call, Mike. I just wanted to add to what the gentleman said about the Belvedere plant. I happened to just get off the main route. It was all backed up in traffic and went down an industrial area, and the parking lots were stuffed. I mean, these are just empty lots fenced in, and they would say Hawk Ford, they would say Summit Chevrolet. These people, their lots are full at the dealership, but yet they're renting property to park more cars. So he's 100% correct. Cars aren't moving.
No, they aren't.
You know, so okay, that's all I wanted to add, and thank you very much.
All right, well, thank you very much. Yeah. No, it's Carmageddon, Retailmageddon, whatever you want to call it. The economy is shutting down. And I think that Washington, D.C. is hoping that getting into a major war will distract us all from it. Yes, times are tough, but there's a war on. Don't blame us. Don't blame the government or the bankers. It's all Russia and China's fault. And Iran. Don't forget Iran. And don't forget North Korea. So let's talk about the abortion controversy, if you will. And I got to be very honest, the Republicans have walked into a big old bear trap because the Democrats are going to make abortion the centerpiece of the 2020 campaign rather than the economy. And the GOP got suckered in on this. Now, Dr. Alveda King, who's director of Priest for Life Civil Rights for the Unborn Project and niece of Reverend Martin Luther King Jr., basically said new abortion laws are not to punish women, but to give the baby civil rights. And I know that's going to fire up that usual debate about, they're not really a person until they're born. But nobody's really in a position to know for certain. It's not like any of us can remember actually being, in the womb before we're born. Being born is a traumatic event. That's usually our earliest memory. I'm in agreement with those heartbeat bills, by the way. I really am. Over in Colorado on I-70, coming in from the state of Utah, there is a new billboard that reads, "Welcome to Colorado, where you can get a safe, legal abortion." And abortion supporters are saying the billboard is meant to let those in neighboring states know that Colorado supports their reproductive medical needs. Abortion opponents say that they want those who don't live in the state abortion opponents say they want those who don't live in the state to know that the message doesn't represent the view of all Coloradians. Okay. Last Sunday, pro-life advocate and NFL star Benjamin Watson apparently took actress and abortion activist Alyssa Milano to the woodshed over her claim that laws restricting abortion would be catastrophic for black women. And Watson chalked up Milano's comments as ignorance, racism, or some combination of both, and asked the actress to stop patronizing black people. Okay, we have a caller waiting on the line here. Mark in North Carolina. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, doing, Mike? I was just listening before to you about these clowns who busted these truckers for having the hemp.
Yes.
I think what's happening today is they're literally hiring retards for cops, for law enforcement as a whole. I'm glad I'm not in it anymore. I'll be honest with you. I'd probably wind up getting a shootout with some of my own, local officers. I mean, these guys are incredible. Now, I would say these was it one or two truckers?
It's a total of three. It's a total of three.
Three trucks. These guys got a monumental. They won't have to be driving a truck or anything else after this. They will have a monumental lawsuit, and they should get every dime of it. I'm talking about millions. What state was this?
This was up in. I've already closed the window. I think it was up in Utah.
All right. Well, they're going to own the state of Utah. Just about. They'll have more money than Romney by the time they're finished. I mean, this is ridiculous. There is no case. There is no case whatsoever. I mean, hemp is a perfectly legal substance.
Yes.
I eat it all the time because it's very healthy. It's very, I have hemp powder and I have hemp seeds and everything else. I mix it in my cereals and my yogurts and whatever else. It's also very high in fiber, different type of vitamins, and this is crazy. I mean, first of all, you shouldn't even be busted if you have marijuana. That should be completely legalized. But this is ridiculous now. I mean, like I said, these guys are going to have a lawsuit and a half. I mean, there's no way to, if they're not going to drop the charges, there's no way an appeals court is going to affirm this. This is absolute. There's no question about it.
Well, I certainly hope somebody's going to show some common sense here. But yeah, they basically went to court and said these guys had marijuana without knowing it was marijuana. And granted, the plants look virtually identical, but there should have been a lab test. But, it wasn't Utah, it was Iowa. But
Iowa?
They literally had to drive down to Kentucky for a lab test to say, no, there's no THC in any of this plant matter. They should have done that before they even filed any charges.
Did the case actually go to trial? Was there actually a jury?
Yeah. It went to trial. They were found guilty. You know,
I talk about the cops being retards, but the prosecutors aren't much better. As a matter of fact, they're just as bad.
Well, the prosecutors, and let's be fair, the prosecutors and the judge were basically going along with what the police said in their report. We arrested these guys driving these trucks full of marijuana.
Yeah, but first of all, everything I remember when I used to work in law enforcement, you need a lab, in something like that, you need a lab test. You have to have, that's one of the evidence, that's a piece of evidence you're supposed to present to the jury, that you have a lab test to show that it actually is what's considered an illegal drug, which of course would be marijuana.
Yes.
Obviously they didn't have it. How they wind up actually going to trial on this without having the lab test done is beyond me. I mean, this is open and shut.
That's the miscarriage of justice right there. And I know there's a petition drive that's been started to basically, mount a petition to say, look, you've made a huge mistake here, and these guys need to be let go. And there may be pushback from the bureaucracy who don't want to admit that they screwed up this badly. And like you, think that if these guys are let out of jail, there's going to be a huge, massive budget-killing lawsuit.
Well, they're not going to. There's nothing they're going to be able to do about it. I mean, we haven't yet reached the point. We're not yet the Third Reich or a Soviet or the Soviet Union. Okay, there's going to be. There's already. I'm sure there's an appeal going on. There's no way that they can. As long as if this is hemp, industrial hemp, or what's called industrial hemp. Hemp is, it's also a food. There's no way. I mean, this is open and shut. Like I said, if they were smart, they would try to drop the charges now and try to make a deal with these truckers, and maybe
Well, I certainly hope so. But the story basically illustrates how out of control the police state mechanism is. Anyway, Mark, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, a while back, there was this pro-life activist protesting in front of an Alabama abortion clinic, and there was this woman, Elizabeth Underwood, who basically punched one of the pro-life activists who were recording her. Apparently, she has been arrested and charged with third-degree assault. So she was in jail. She's been bailed out. So good. Let's try and be civil. All right, let's take a couple more phone calls. John in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Mike. Just been listening for a long time. God bless you. Thanks for all the work you and Claire have done. Keep it up, and I'm trying to keep supporting you guys.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I just want to insert a little bit different. I have a book I got back in 2008 from the late Michael Collins Piper. I'm sure you're aware of his writings. But he kind of changed things. He wrote this book. It's a fictitious account of what might happen. Like the Warhawks, they triggered a war. They attacked Iran, and Iran responded, and they sunk an American vessel, and to protect themselves. And it looked like war was going to be really imminent. Well, all of a sudden, some patriotic people in the military turned around and stopped it all. And what ended up, I think that was toward the end of the term of Bush Jr., they took control of the White House. They put him under arrest, and a lot of the liberals and the neocons they captured. And what happened was they asked Michael Piper. They had he knew a lot of people. They asked him to assume the presidency for the remainder of that term until a new election came up. And he just wrote the accounts of what you want changed happened. I mean, Israel was subdued. the power of the Rothschilds, the bankers, everything was put under control. They went back to the Constitution and got rid of a lot of stuff and put it the way it's supposed to be. And I just read it for the second time, and it's a real breath of fresh air. I know it's fictitious, and the minute I finished it, you look back and things are still the same. But it does show you that what he wrote says it could happen if enough people really stand up and said, I've had enough.
It could. But again, I think rather than a revolution, that the future of this government is a Soviet Union-style collapse.
No, I know what you mean, but I just thought I'd interject that. I don't know if the book's still available or not, but it's a good read.
What was it called again?
I'm sorry. It was called My First Days in the White House by Michael Collins Piper.
Okay, I remember seeing it whiz by. I didn't read it, but I remember seeing it. Anything else, John?
Anyway, it's something, I just thought I'd interject. But, yeah, I agree with all what's going on. Yeah, they've got enough people have to say enough is enough. That's the problem. We're all scattered. We're not hungry enough, Mike.
That's about to change.
Yeah. Hopefully we'll see what happens. All right. Keep up the good work, you and Claire. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you very much for the phone call. We're going to switch over to Sherry in Texas. Aloha, Sherry. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Thank you, Mike. Yeah, we have at our fingertips, this is about the hemp, we have at our fingertips an affordable, that's number one, affordable, effective way to ease our pain, to have a pain medicine that we can afford. And it's like gold, of all the pain we suffer, here's an affordable way that's going to be effective and heal us without becoming addictive. What drug companies do now, they'll get something. Like, let's say, for example, I won't name the company, but there was like black coash was a really good natural thing that you could take from a health food store if you have hot flashes. It's for women, when they go through the change and stuff.
Yes.
Well, this drug company got a hold of it, and what they normally do, it seems they follow this. Well, this is just my observation. I don't know how it really works, but they chemically reproduce it first. If they can find a way to economize, for economy purposes, they say, okay, let's break this down and see what it contains that's working. And they chemically reproduce it with something that would be cheaper and maybe drugs that would cause mild addictive things, so they'll stick with it. And then once they've got them on it, this happened with a lip balm. It was a perfectly wonderful lip balm, and they added one ingredient that made your lips really dry during the summer, so you were not just using it for the winter anymore. You had to put this stuff on all year long because
yes.
I think start with a C. I don't know. I don't want to cross the boundaries here, but they make it so it's no longer affordable. It's no longer effective because you need it all the time, and it's not really healing anything. It's just making you dependent. And so what they do then, once they've got that, the drug companies have that tied down, they patent it so that they have control over it. And there goes our effective, affordable remedy for pain that's not going to make you sick or addicted to it. There
yes.
it goes. And if we and they know it, that there's money for them to make on this thing because it's just there where we can grow it. I mean, it's just so available and so natural. And I know that black coash was mixed with something that was causing heart attacks for people. I mean, it's
okay.
Yeah,
well, Sherry, we're gonna have to let you go.
Yes.
Got to take another break for commercials. We'll be right
Okay.
back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. And stepping on back to the stories about Boeing, there's another one just breaking. Apparently, Boeing has issued a statement admitting that the pilot training simulators for the 737 MAX did not accurately reproduce what actually happens if the MCAS system broke down. And Boeing has said it's made corrections to the 737 MAX simulator software and provided additional information to device operators. Apparently, the simulators used for pilot training did not reflect the immense force that it would take for pilots to regain control of the aircraft after disabling the electronically assisted trim controls. Remember what I said about the aerodynamics of those larger engines put forward? That once the plane tipped up, those engine nacelles were going to act like additional control authority, and they would be pushing backwards on the wing. Boeing really messed up on this one. Okay, getting on back to the world of political correctness here. Ray Blanchard, who is the groundbreaking psychologist who helped craft the diagnostic and treatment procedures for clinicians dealing with transgenderism, has now been blocked on Twitter because some of his tweets were flagged for hateful conduct. And apparently what he said was that he viewed many of the so-called gender fluidity, gender dysphoria, as mental illnesses, and Twitter banned him for that. Of course, psychologists think everything's a mental illness, so they may have overreacted on that one. Okay, a little bit of entertainment news. Normally I don't do entertainment news, but I wanted to do this one. Pardon me. There's a movie about to come out called Rocket Man about Elton John, and it stars Taron Egerton, who was the young kid from The Kingsman. And the LGBT community is up in arms because Taron Egerton is a heterosexual. And of course, Elton John is gay, and they're saying, no, you should have had somebody who was gay play this guy. And Elton John, good for him, said, that's nonsense. Well, actually, he used stronger language than that. He's saying, if people don't like it review-wise, or if it doesn't make $1, it's the movie I wanted to make, and that's all that counts. So John took the position the film needed to personally please him, regardless of whether LGBT groups or anybody else were served. So apparently Egerton has done a good job in portraying Elton John. So good for Elton John. It's a voice of sanity that's coming on through and saying it's really gone too far. Now, Ryan Tedder is a composer and musician. He's written some of pop's biggest hits, including Beyoncé's Halo, Ed Sheeran's Happier, and One Republic for his own band. But he says music is in danger of being stifled by the rise in all of these copyright cases, especially the ones that say it's a derivative. And he said, it's a conversation in every writing session. The odds of getting sued in this day and age are so high, we're going to get to a point where nobody can write anything because everything will be derivative of something else. He says, it's just ludicrous. And he's absolutely right. He's absolutely, absolutely right. Okay, we're going to take a phone call now. Ken in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Howdy. Hey, the Daystar television studio in Jerusalem was firebombed and destroyed.
Oh, it was?
Yeah. Go hunt, Google it, and you'll find it.
My goodness, that's a terrible thing here. Okay, I'm typing. Yeah, Christian broadcaster Daystar's Jerusalem studio destroyed by firebomb, rather. Yeah, I'll put the story up on the next commercial break. Thank you very much. Kenny, you there? I guess not. Alrighty. The other day we were reporting on how the Ecuadorian embassy in London has simply turned over to U.S. prosecutors all of the items and documents belonging to Julian Assange. And people are starting to say this is a dangerous precedent because there was no warrant, there was no legal proceeding, there was no judge that said you can do this. There was no legal basis for it whatsoever. And basically they're saying that Ecuadorian President Lenin Moreno just totally sold out. And of course he got that IMF loan. There is a new lawsuit against Tesla, and it's from Christina Balin. She's a former Tesla engineer. She worked for Tesla until 2014. She's now claiming the firm has accused her of misusing company money and working on her own secret side project. Now, Tesla is attempting to force the dispute into private arbitration, arguing that documents signed by Balin when she joined Tesla removed her right to a full hearing in a court of law. Now, Balin argued in a court document filed in Seattle that the dispute does not relate directly to her former employment at Tesla, and as a result is not covered in the document she signed. Balin stated that Tesla's previous attempts to sue former employees shows this arbitration agreement is only meant to be one-sided and only with intention to silence their employees. And by the way, this is very common. If you sign on to a major corporation and there's an employment contract, you read that thing carefully all the way through, because they'll have clauses in there like things that you invent automatically belong to your employer. And there was a big lawsuit about this many, many years ago. Sears, and one of their employees invented the ratcheting wrench, and Sears said, well, you work for us, so therefore this is our product, and basically that was the cornerstone of the Craftsman tool division. And the original inventor went to court and argued that he was not hired by Sears to invent things, therefore Sears did not have a right to that, and the courts agreed. And he got a very nice settlement. It's called the Craftsman decision. Okay, this is kind of a little gray area. And apparently over in North Carolina, there's an RV store. It's called Camping World. And their CEO, Marcus Lemonis, is in a battle against city leaders over this huge American flag that flies high above his Gander RV business in Statesville, North Carolina, along Interstate 77. Now, Lemonis has a CNBC television show, The Prophet, and the issue seems to be the flag is 40 by 80 feet in size. The city is saying it's too large and violates a city ordinance. And they're saying if he wants a flag, it has to be smaller than 25 by 40 feet. So he's digging in his heels. Apparently the issue has to do with the safety of the flag near a highway, saying that the flag within 100 feet of a highway can't be larger than 25 by 40 feet. So it's not a case of somebody saying, you know, you can't put up the flag. It looks like it's a safety ordinance, but this guy's going to keep on fighting, I guess, here. Over in Switzerland, they are one of the most gun-friendly nations in Europe. It has one of the highest rates of gun ownership per capita on the continent. Those numbers may be low because many households contain guns technically owned by the military, as veterans keep their service weapons at home for rapid call-up purposes. Switzerland is not part of the European Union, although they do enjoy a good relationship with the EU. But right now, the EU is demanding that Switzerland adopt EU-style gun laws in place, or else find its easy access to the rest of Europe cut off. So the nation is set to vote on whether it should adopt new gun control measures. Opponents of the move are invoking a folk hero known for shooting tyrants, William Tell. So he's going to get his day in the sun again. Getting to the worlds of computers, for some reason, the United States Navy is seeking to create an archive that will store no less than 350 billion, with a B, social media posts as part of the military branch's research efforts into modes of collective expression. I'm not even sure what they mean by that. But apparently the Navy has posted a solicitation asking contractors to bid on the project that would amass all of this data from between 2014 through 2016. The data will be taken from a single social media platform. They are not specifying which one. Okay, Firefox version 67 has been released. They're claiming it has a performance boost, which is an issue, but the new part that they have in there is that supposedly it will block crypto mining. And that sounds like something that I would certainly want to look at because this crypto mining is out of control. They're stealing compute cycles, memory, electricity from everybody, turning it into cryptocurrencies, and they're cashing out. And speaking of other issues with computers, if you rent a car from Hertz you might be pulled over and arrested by the police for seemingly no reason at all. Apparently, customers of Hertz are being erroneously stopped due to a faulty computer system and plain old poor office management. And it seems that because of this computer glitch, Hertz is reporting stolen vehicles to the police when they're actually being legitimately rented by customers. So you might want to stay away from Hertz until they get that one fixed. Over in Baltimore, what a trouble they are having there. It's been almost 2 weeks since the city of Baltimore's networks were shut down in response to a ransomware attack, and there's still no end in sight. It may be weeks more before the city's services return to something resembling normal. They're putting in manual workarounds to try and get things going, but the city's water billing and other payment systems remain offline. Now, here is where the story takes an interesting little turn. The ransomware attack came in the middle of a major transition at City Hall. Mayor Bernard C. Jack Young assumed office officially just days before the attack after the resignation of former Mayor Catherine Pugh, who is facing an ever-expanding corruption investigation. And some of the mayor's critical staff positions remain unfilled. The mayor's deputy chief of staff for operations, Cheryl Goldstein, starts work today. Well, the first thing I thought about was if the entire city of Baltimore has been hit by ransomware, go ahead and pay the ransom. But if it's dragged on this long, it tells me maybe there wasn't a ransom demand made. And maybe this former mayor is carrying a grudge and knows somebody who knows how to hack computer systems. And this might be her revenge. It's all speculation, of course, but it's certainly not beyond the realm of possibility. Apparently, a massive database containing contact information for millions of Instagram influencers, celebrities, and brand accounts has been found online. The database was being hosted by Amazon Web Services, was left exposed without a password. It had over 49 million records. They left it online without a password here. Okay. We had a caller mention this earlier in the show. That ban on Huawei is already being scaled back. The Commerce Department has scaled back the restrictions on the telecom maker and is basically saying that they would issue a temporary general license amending the Export Administration regulation to authorize specific limited engagement in transactions involving the export, re-export, and transfer of items to Huawei Technologies Limited and its 68 non-U.S. affiliates. So they blinked on that one. More and more cities are getting real-time facial recognition systems, surveillance systems actually, and part of the problem is there is no federal legislation regulating the use of these systems. And so cities are gobbling up these China-style facial recognition systems. Individual cities can block the surveillance technology, but most citizens are sound asleep and oblivious that this is going on. Apparently, Chicago and Detroit have bought real-time facial recognition systems. Chicago says it's not actually using the system yet. Detroit says it's not using the system either, but they could start at any time, again, because there is no regulation whatsoever. Okay, there is an Android app. It's called VidMate. It's an app that enables them to download videos from YouTube, WhatsApp, and other platforms. And this functionality made VidMate, which has ties to Chinese tech giant Alibaba, hugely popular in countries such as India, where streaming mobile video can be expensive or at times unreliable. But apparently it's been found that VidMate has been displaying hidden ads, secretly subscribing people to paid services, and draining users' mobile data. This according to security researchers at a London-based mobile technology firm. Now, researchers at Upstream say VidMate subjects its users to a range of suspicious behavior that could be costing them money. VidMate is saying that no, there's nothing wrong. The app does not engage in suspicious activity. The VidMate spokesman also declined to provide basic information such as the names of VidMate executives and funders, and did not respond to follow-up questions. Alrighty, if you're in Denver, dress warm. Snow has arrived at Denver International Airport. Potential of 1 to 2 inches accumulating in the city. I got an email from somebody saying there was 5 where they were. And, you know, long before global warming, there was a consensus of scientists who warned that global cooling was responsible for extreme weather events. And looking at how much cooler it is this spring and the serious storms which are continuing over the Great Plains. Apparently they had tornadoes in Oklahoma today. And right now, the global cooling scare of the 1970s is being denounced as an urban myth by the global warming cult. But it was at one time promoted as a very real concern. And if you read my article on ClimateGate, it's documented in there with magazine covers about, you know, the coming ice age. So apparently the National Center for Atmospheric Research is the U.S. federal government's top authority on climate science. And in 1974, Stephen Schneider was running the place. Okay, and out there warning massive food shortages, blah, 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 blah. Okay, we're going to take a break for commercials. Back with the last segment of our program today after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Last segment of the program today. We're going to take one more phone call, and that's from Layla in Canada. Aloha, Layla. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
A lot of your callers have been expressing the same kind of concerns that I've expressed. Now, I've said it simply as taxes that parents and grandparents have paid and older people such as myself have paid. We look at it as an investment, and we're being robbed of the dividends of that investment as the government steals it and gives it away to aliens who never contributed.
Yes.
The other thing that brings to mind is the fact, is there any value anymore in a will? How long before the government decides who is going to be the beneficiary of your property, since property rights are one of the most fundamental rights that exist within a democracy? That and free speech. Property rights, free speech, those are two fundamental issues that actually constitute the foundation of what we consider the ideal democracy. I'm not saying it's going to happen anytime soon, but we do see something similar in the fact that we are already being denied the rights that essentially were gifted to us by previous generations, our parents and grandparents, when they paid those taxes. And now we have no say over how they're being spent.
No, we really don't.
So my concern is if we don't take action very, very soon, we're already losing our property rights in the present. More and more property is being infringed upon and being confiscated by municipalities and or government, federal or state government.
Well, not just that. I mean, the government comes into your property and tells you what you can and cannot do with it. Yeah. It doesn't sound like you really own that property any longer.
No, you don't. Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's something of grave concern that I don't think people are paying enough attention to, and the fact that our taxes are being given away, as one of your previous callers said. Alien kids are being given surgeries that cost 2, 3, multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars, when many of the longtime taxpayers can't even get access to the health care.
Yes.
So if something isn't done soon, we're basically already serfs or indentured servants of the aliens. We're already working for the aliens. Basically, we're now the serfs or the slaves of the newcomers that are being imported to enslave us and be our overlords in the future. So just something more that I wanted to put out there for people to consider.
All right. Well, thank you for the call, Layla. And we're going to try and fit in one final call before the end of the show. Glenn in Philadelphia. Aloha. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I just wanted to make a point about the gun rights issue. Switzerland should stand its ground and make no overtures toward the EU.
I agree. I absolutely agree. But unfortunately, if you look at the geography, if you look at the geography, the EU can make good on its threat to cut off Switzerland's easy access to the EU. And this is just the EU being its bullying self. Anyway, listen, Glenn, I'm sorry, we're at the end of the show. I got to let you go. Thanks very much for the phone call. You can call in again tomorrow if you want to talk about this some more. Please stay tuned for John Stedmiller. I'm sure he's got lots of interesting things to share with you. Please take what you learn here, share it with everyone. Please donate to Republic Broadcasting. Please donate to whatreallyhappened.com. Thanks to those of you who already have done that. We'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.